at ICC, gonna play a little 45-45 in the 45-minute pool, and I'll explain my thoughts as I go on. Okay, first move, knight f3. Gonna play the King's Indian attack, also known as the chess opening for you. Alright, e6 is kind of an unusual answer, but that's fine. I don't mind it. I'll just keep playing what I do and see what he shows, because that's what you do. You play the same moves against this opening no matter what they do. Well, not against everything they do. You've got to be careful you can't go drop a piece or something. And if he makes a mistake, a blunder, you take advantage of it. But generally speaking, the first white moves aren't going to be threatening much of anything that black need to worry about. Okay, so he set up a pawn center. That's fine. Not worried about that at all. To worry about it would mean that I don't need to play this opening. Okay, so now I start preparing for e4. Okay, so what's queen b6 do? Anything I should worry about? Well, it avoids potential exchanges of the queens if the e-file should open up, but right now it's not doing that. I can play knight d2 here, followed by queen c2, and then e4. So I'll just do that. Knight d2. So eventually I'd like to get control of c4 away from him so I can get my thematic knight to c4 in. Since his queen is on b6, it's a target. He's pressuring b2 to some degree, but I don't get this dark squared bishop developed for a while in this opening. It's one thing I don't like about it. The queen, rook, and queen bishop tend to stay back a little bit longer than I like, but they still come out eventually. And my queen will get to c2, and it'll secure b2 well enough. So really there hasn't been much, if any, thought in the white position yet, because that's what this is the chess opening for you. You just play these routine moves and go from there. Okay, so I accumulate a little increment time here because I can play these moves relatively quickly without having to explain them all. If you've watched these videos, you've already seen the ideas that go behind this chess opening for you, so it's just a matter of playing them. And then when it's time to start thinking on my own, then I can have time to spend and share with you, share my ideas and my assessment and my evaluations. And I still have a few more thematic moves to make, queen c2 and then e4, before I could start getting out of my book. Okay, so like I say, one thing that's concerning me is to try to get c4 wrested away from him so that I can play my knight to c4. But we're still a ways away from that. Now what's he going to do? Castle queenside? Well, that's fine. I don't mind. You have to play this system against anything they play against you, so let's just talk about it. If he does decide to castle queenside, that means eventually he's going to send some kind of pawn storm my way, and if he does, well, his queen's on the queen side. It's not going to help his attack any, so probably he's not going to castle king side. Okay, now I can play e4 now, and it has some potential threats behind it. It might want to go to e5 and tickle his knight. Where does his knight go? Well, it goes to g4, right? Now he's attacking e5, so I've got to cover that. I could do that by rook e1. Okay, good. He's done exactly what I want. Now I've got c4. Okay, so now I want to be able to play knight c4 here and attack his queen and gain a tempo. Black has a slight lead in development, only because he's ready to castle and I haven't developed my queen bishop yet. But that will change. So how does he stop knight c4? He could play knight a5 and put a knight on the rim. Okay, well this is good because now he's spent a tempo back. That e-pawn has taken 2 moves to get to a square. Could have gone 2 and 1. And so now I tempo the queen. And also I have, for what it's worth, I have control of d5 now. Knight e3 and knight d5 can be coming. Now, knight c4 might have been rushed. I might have played a4 first. The reason being that he might have gone queen b5 attacking the knight, but he didn't. But now he's threatening to play b5. And for the moment, I would like to keep the knight on c4. Well, actually, he wasn't really threatening queen b5 because I was pressuring e5. And we had that in the other game yesterday where poor black did not defend d5. Okay, so I'm attacking it twice. I can't get another attacker on it. And he's eyeballing playing pawn to b5 to drive my knight away, although it's probably going to go there eventually. Alright, so I'll just play a4 here, and I'm still in my opening theory, and we'll wait developments. Okay, so he can castle either side, and then I can play moves like bishop d2 or bishop g5, and my development is completed. Okay, so game is even. You know, you don't get any kind of clear advantage with this opening. You just play it against what your opponent plays, and from there you just continue your game. Okay, so now he's attacking the knight. Actually, he's just driving it to where it wants to go, which is fine with me. Okay, so let's stop and hesitate a second. One thing I can't do it. What if I could have done it last move? Let's see, let me just put this arrow. Maybe I missed a shot. Okay, no I can't. Or can I? Knight f takes e5. Queen can't take, so knight takes e5, and then bishop f4, pinning the knight. And he has bishop d6, and I've pitched a piece. Okay, so it wasn't there, and it's still not here. Knight takes e5, and he takes with the knight, and my knight on c3 is loose. Okay, so that's fine. I'll play knight e3 here. Even if I have to stop the bishop on d2, I will. But then I'm planning maybe moves like knight g5. Okay, I got to get this guy out. That's my only concern now. Got to work on this, since I'm not able to maintain the knight on c4 right at the moment. Well, I could put, I don't want to walk into a pin, and I don't want to play knight ge2 to maintain it there. So I'll just play knight e3. Now I'm eyeballing d5 and f5. e4 is only protected by my queen, but I'm not too worried about that. He doesn't have another guy to bring into the attack, and I can always move my knight and get there. Okay, now we're kind of on our own here, so let's think about the position a little bit. Okay, so what has white gained in these 13 moves? Well, I've got almost all my pieces out of the box. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is I've been able to play the opening quickly. I didn't have to stop and think really at all. Everything was quick and routine. Now, if you're playing in a tournament game where you say play 40 moves in 2 hours along that line, you now have 2 hours to make 27 moves, or 120 minutes to make 27 moves, which is basically a little over 4 minutes a move, and that's a tremendous time to have. I've seen a number of players they're getting close to time trouble in 13 moves. What are they doing? Why did they play an opening that they didn't understand that made them get into time trouble? I just don't get it, but they do. So that's one advantage of the chess opening for you. It gets you a quick easy game to play, and that's, like I say, the main idea here. You don't have to really know a lot of openings, and excuse me, you just know one, and you're left with this position. Okay, so candidate moves. I got to think about some candidate moves. Ideally, I'd like to drop a knight into d5, but I'm not ready. But I can prepare it. I can play knight g5. Now that attacks his bishop. Now there's some pluses and minuses with that. Okay, the plus is that if I take it, if I was allowed 2 moves in this position, which I'm not, meaning black has a chance to defend. Let's just say I play knight g5 and knight takes e6, and we'll figure out later what his move would have been. Okay, when he takes back with the f pawn, he's got double pawns, but I'm no longer pressuring d5 and f5 with my knight. It's no longer there. So what's my knight doing? It's not doing a heck of a lot. It's in the way of my bishop. So then maybe what I would need to do is play the knight back to c4 where it came from, and then I can develop the bishop. And where do I develop it? If I put it on e3, maybe it gets swapped off if he plays knight g4. So, and if I play bishop g5, then he could play h6, and what do I do with it? Ideally, I want to keep that bishop. It's such a long-term piece that's going to be helpful for me. So, but I could anchor it in on e3 by playing knight c4, h3, and then bishop e3, and then I've kept it, and I've got a decent position with it here, and then later try to trade my light squared bishop for one of his knights. Okay, so that's kind of like one theme, but I can't reach this position directly because remember, black has an extra move. We have to decide what his move was going to be while he was allowing this, and he might be playing a move like rook a to d8, and although it doesn't really threaten much. Okay, so theoretically we'll just consider that he played rook a d8 and I play knight c4. Now he plays rook d7 and I play h3. Now he plays rook a d8, and it looks like I've given up quite a lot to give him the control of the open file, but really that's an illusion because he's not threatening to enter down that open file in any way, shape, or form. And I just play bishop e3, and my bishop is safe on e3, and then I can follow up with rook a d1, and the file is neutralized, and then I have one weakness in this position, the double pawns, and then we start conducting operations against them, and one could say that maybe both of them are weak, and there I have the requisite 2 weaknesses in order to win the game, and I start conducting my my plan against those 2 pawns. That's going to take a while, but trade off some heavy wood and we're in a minor piece ending and things can happen. So it's not much yet, but it's something to go on, and that's all. This is all predicated on me playing the candidate move knight to g5. So the main question is, what other candidate moves do I have in this position? If I want to find a new square for the bishop, I could slow play with b3, but and then put the bishop on either b2 or a3. But it's not doing me much good there, except getting out of the way, and it prepares me to play my rooks to the d file, which will give me a little more control on d5. That might be a square I want to go to with my knight. I might definitely want to occupy that square. So let's just suppose b3, and he plays rook ad8, and I play bishop b2, and we'll go back and say he plays rook d7. Now I play rook ad1, and he doubles rooks on the file, and he's crawling all over d5, and I'm not. In order to get another guy on d5, I have to move my knight on f3 to support d5. Now this might be a position where I can play knight g5, and his bishop is more or less trapped now and it can't get out, and I may not want to take it. I'll go back to knight g5 in a moment, because one thing about playing knight g5 is its idea is to play knight d5, and let's see if I have enough. But before I do that, I've just gone into the line with b3, and my last move is knight g5, threatening to chop his bishop off, and now we've kind of transposed into the line where I did take it, and we have opposed rooks, and they're getting ready to trade, and my bishop, my dark squared bishop, will come into play later. So theoretically this line is okay, and it could transpose into the lines where I've played knight g5 and taken his bishop on e6. So let's consider knight g5 one more time. He might panic and just play bishop d7. I can't lose my bishop. Or he might play queen d7. And okay, so let's consider queen d7. Well, the problem with that is I have a tempo rook d1, and I have further control over d5, and I'm ready to play knight d5, which we want to test out. And okay, so let's try queen c8 instead, but then I can get knight d5 in. Okay, now he can't take with the knight because I get a pawn fork, and I'm threatening to take both his bishops off with my knights for what it's worth, which may cause him to panic, and be kind of fun to play an ending with two bishops versus two knights. That just doesn't give an illustrative purposes how to handle that. So knight g5, like I say, he may panic and play bishop d7 just to keep his bishop, and that's fine with me, because then that allows knight d5 right away. Okay, so then knight d5, what does he do? If he plays knight takes d5, then I take with my e-pawn, and I'm attacking his knight, and his knight needs a square, and it doesn't have too many of them. It has a5, and the idea of that is to play it to c4 so they can hop back into play by way of d6 or b6, and my knight on g5 is safe. It's protected by the bishop on c1, and I've got a pass pawn for what it's worth. I've got open diagonals for my bishops. I've got and like I say, his knight's just sadly out of play. I could even play b3 here, and then his knight has to get into play by way of b6, so then we'll allow him b6, and then I just complete my development with bishop, well, it's not quite complete, bishop e3, just to have a square for it, and then he could play knight b7. He also might play h6, and then knight e4 and f5, and where's my knight go? Well, it goes back to d2, and then he gets f4 in, but his king side is getting a little weak, but I'm not really poised to exploit it, so I have to be careful here about opening up the position towards my king, because then I think I'm even losing a piece in that line, and my bishop doesn't have a flight square, so I have to be a little careful. Keep that in mind down the line. None of this is forced. I'm sure I can find an improvement, and I don't need to find an improvement now. Again, a lot of times you just have to get the basics down and remember these things when they come later. That whole line shouldn't be forced where I get my bishop trapped. I don't have to play into that at all, and we'll just contemplate a little bit more. I've spent about 10 minutes on this move, all for you, to enlighten you and give you ideas how to play. Alright, so coming back to the initial position, I've examined a couple candidate moves, B3, which is kind of slow, and knight G5. And but on knight G5, if he plays bishop D7, I don't have to rush knight D5 in. I can in turn find another candidate move. One interesting move is just to play knight F5 at some point. After he's spent a tempo moving his bishop, now he could spend another tempo taking it off. And what does this do? Well, it clears the E4 square for my knight on G5 and opens up the diagonal of my bishop on G2. And so I kind of like that a little bit better than knight D5. Even though the knight D5 gives me this pass pawn, that's not a very valuable pass pawn at all. It won't be for a long time. So, okay, knight G5 is my move, and we'll see if he panics with bishop D7, and then I'm going to get knight F5 in. Okay, so it's now his move, and he's probably wondering why is Mr. Allrat's taking so long. Well, just working things out. Okay, so what will he do? We've considered queen C8, rook A D8. We've considered these moves for him, and we don't know what he's going to do until he does it. And then, of course, if he allows me the double his pawns, I have some ways to attack it that I didn't mention before. I can play moves like queen B3, which pins his pawn, and if he defends it, I can then drop my knight into F5, and he can't take it because of the pin, and so all kinds of possibilities here. Yeah, and I'll try to make this point again. You don't have to see everything the first move, the first time through, because you're going into different branches of the tree of analysis. Just imagine a branch, and out of that branch comes a smaller branch, and out of that branch comes other smaller twigs, or whatever you want to call them, and there's a myriad of variations that are available, and as long as you can look at just a little bit down the line, you say, well, that's fine. I don't need to evaluate that position because you'll just mount up hours and hours of possible moves that you'll never reach these positions. A computer engine, of course, can do that because it sees everything in microseconds. But human beings, we just need to know that, well, I can play this position. And here, just take this position for instance. If I had it as I have it as white, but suppose I had it as black. Well, if I had it as black, I would find a plan. I know what to do. What would I do if I had black here? Well, I would probably retreat the bishop, to be honest. Or other candidate moves would be queen C8 and knight D8 just to preserve it. Okay, so he has done what I said. He is allowing me to take it, and he's going to go for action on the D file, but he really doesn't have a lot of action there, as I've explained. I have it neutralized, even though I'm not caught up in development yet. My queen rook and queen bishop are sitting there at home, and I hate them sitting there. And I lecture the guys on Team 45 League all the time about how long do those pieces stay there. You're giving the odds of a rook and a bishop, and here I'm doing it. Okay, I'm not a hypocrite. I'm just trying to develop an opening that you guys can learn easily and not have to prepare openings yourself. The drawback, at least the way I'm playing it, is they stay home. Maybe I'm going to have to work on that next game and do a little experimenting. Okay, so knight takes e6, f takes e6. Now what I was playing is my candidate move before was, what was it, b3? Or was it knight c4? What I'll be doing now is queen b3, which attacks his pawn. Now how is he going to handle that? He's got to defend it. And then I can bring another attacker in if I need to. My bishop from g2 can go to h3. So he might play queen c8, and I have two happy candidate moves. I have bishop h3, and I have knight f5. So I'll take his bishop because I want, like I said, explained earlier, it's possible that those doubled king pawns he has are the two weaknesses in his position, and the two weaknesses that I need to win the game. And before I start analyzing candidate moves here, let's just discuss that for a moment. You need two weaknesses to win. You have to have that. That's all outlined in lesson 007. And we're going to assume for a moment those two weaknesses are those two pawns. And think about it. If they can't be defended by pawns, they're isolated and stuck. So let's assume I can win one of them. If I win one of them, I'm now a pawn ahead, right? And we consider that a weakness. And the other e-pawn is weak because it's isolated. So now I focus on the other weakness. Okay? So it's safe to say that black does have the two requisite weaknesses in his position for white to win. But white has to prove it. Okay, so what I was saying was queen b3 here. Now, does he have any shocking moves at his disposal? Well, no, because my position is rock solid. He doesn't have this sudden checkmate out of thin air or a tactic to pick up a win of a piece. Okay, so queen b3. If he plays knight a5, for instance, I just take the pawn with check. And the only thing I can see with knight a5 is he's trying to get his knight into b3, which really doesn't do a lot, and my queen's covering that square. Okay, so queen b3 almost just screams to be played. I think it's better than the other candidate move I was examining originally, and whatever that was it b3 or knight c4? I don't remember, but whatever it was, I think it was knight c4, so my bishop could get to so I could play h3 and bishop e3. But then I've kind of, one drawback with that strategy is I've wasted some time maneuvering my knight, and time is important. You've got to get your pieces into play, and since he has a weakness, here it is, queen b3. Now he's got to deal with that. How is he going to deal with it? If he plays queen d6, I have rook d1, and he can't take on d1 with his queen. He just drops a queen for a rook. So he's got to play probably queen c8 here. I don't see. He could play rook d6, and he might run into some tricks against that rook. I mean, then I can play knight c4 with tempo, and now his rook can go somewhere else, and his pawn is not covered. But I can bring another attacker in there with bishop h3. So knight c4 may be better in that position, but I can see some resources he has. His rook could drop back to d7, and then he saves d8 for his knight to retreat to cover e6. So there's potential defenses in here with rook d6, but his candidate moves are queen c8 and rook d6, and he may have to even consider at some point king f7, and that just seems pretty ugly because his king shuts off his rook on the open f file that he's got, or the half open f file if you prefer, and I can still drop something into f5 because the pin is still there. You know, by something I mean my knight on e3. So his only other alternative is to try to counterattack something, and he doesn't have enough wood out to counterattack. Okay, so he played queen c8. Okay. So if I play bishop h3 here, what's he going to do? His candidate moves are rook d6 and king f7. So if he plays rook d6, I play knight c4. Now his rook's loose again. Where does his rook go? Well, it pretty much has to go back to d8, doesn't it? Because it can't go to d7. It interferes with his queen, and he just loses quickly. So then he goes the rook back to d8. Now I've made some progress here. I've kept his knight out of g4, and I have increased some pressure on e5. He does have a defender there, his knight on c6, and I can play bishop e3. Now this is a much better way to go about it, and therefore I've just about completed my development. He can't molest my bishop on e3, and next I'm going to find a new way to assault E6. Okay, so then the other plan is that to contrast that with is that after bishop h3 and rook d6 is that I play knight f5, and now I'm attacking his rook again, and he can't move it, right? I mean, he can't take my knight on f5. So rook d6 seems to fail because now I have a nice combination. Where's he put the rook? He can't put it on, well, he can put it on d7, but I get e6 with check, right? And so I'm winning at least a pawn there. And if he goes to d6, then I take on e7 with check, and he's going to get his queen forked. After knight takes e7, I have bishop takes e6 check, and game over. So rook d6 just as a lemon. Knight e5, he's forced to play rook d7 because rook d8 fails, and then I play queen takes e6 check, and he goes king e8. Oh, and then he's just walking into a new pin. Knight takes e7, and if he takes with the rook, I play queen takes c8. Nothing's guarding the queen except for the rook, and I have a bishop backing it up, so he takes with the knight, and as I said, he's walking into a pin here. My queen just retreats on the diagonal, and his rook on d7 is pinned. So he can't play rook d6, he's stuck with king f7, so we just have to analyze that. I could be close to getting a winning game right now. Okay, so let's see. We don't know yet, but sure looks right. Just have to evaluate it, and I like to double check. And it's an interesting thing with, if you look at the discussion that Grandmaster Alexander Kotov did in his book Think Like a Grandmaster, he talked about candidate moves, and his basic rule is you should look at every line once and only once. Well, maybe that's good at a Grandmaster level, but I think he's forgetting one thing, and I'm not trying to criticize him. He's the Grandmaster, I'm not. But we're not grandmasters, and we're trying to learn this, and ideally we'd like to only look at a variation once. Certainly as the silicone beasts only look at it once, but we're humans, and we can miss things, and if you look at it once, you have to be sure you're seeing it 100% correct each time. So when you have time on the clock, you can look at things a second or a third time if need be. And as you get better at chess, yeah, then you can eventually get down to looking at it once or twice. Okay, so let's consider the candidate move. Okay, what I was playing was bishop h3, and I said he needed to play king f7, right? Because rook d6 seemed to fail. Now, I even have knight d5 in here because now his e6 pawn is pinned. I've got that pawn is pinned both ways, so I can not only play knight f5, I can play knight d5, and he's got some problems. So, like for instance, knight d5, he can't take with the pawn. So suppose he doesn't have to take anything, but let's just analyze the captures. Okay, knight takes d5. Okay, e takes d5. Now I'm threatening to take on e6 with my bishop, forking him. So let's suppose he plays rook takes d5, and then I think I win. I just play queen takes d5, giving up my queen. He plays pawn takes d5. And I play bishop takes c8, and he plays rook takes c8, and I have an exchange advantage. He has a pawn for it, and he's got a nice imposing pawn center, but I believe white wins this. I think he's going to lose that, and then I demonstrate how to win when you up an exchange and your opponent has a pawn compensation. So we're very close to getting a winning position here. It's just a matter of verifying everything out. Okay, so bishop h3 gives him extreme difficulties here. Okay, so let's see. I'm looking at this on another board off to the left because I don't want to play two-dimensional chess. I want to look at a three-dimensional board and work these things out. Okay, so bishop h3. What are his candidate moves? Aside from giving up the pawn, which he may have to, maybe just have to play king h8 and allow me to take that pawn and then get his queen out of danger. Aside from that, he doesn't have time. One drawback with bishop h3 is I just noticed e4 is hanging, but he doesn't have time to act on that. Okay, so what was I saying? King f7. What if I play knight e5? Okay, now he does have knight takes e4 in that position. Okay, and that may refute my whole thing. Okay, but it's not necessarily totally refuted. I've got some things here. I can pick up his bishop on e7. How is he going to take with his king? Then his king's getting in trouble. Take with a knight. Okay, then I'm assuming his king getting in trouble. It just looks risky to be there. I can play rook e1, and I'm pressuring the knight on d5 or e4. And if the knight moves, I just pick up the pawn on e5, and I have the two bishops, and he has a weakness on e6. So, win that, I'm a pawn ahead. I seem to have some good play here. And if push comes to shove, if I have to stop for a moment and spend a tempo, I can always play a move like h3. I'm sorry, not h3, f3, and secure the pawn on e4 and let him wallow in his misery. So I just played bishop h3. I don't want to get in time trouble over this. This one, 45 minutes is a lot of time, but it isn't a lot of time. It's basically an average rate of under 2 minutes a move, which is a little quicker than I'm used to playing in order to play my best chess for you. This chess is not a race, a race of the clock. It's a time game, and nothing to me is more enjoyable than about a 5-hour long game. Well, go to the movies. What do they last? An hour and a half, 2 hours? That's even less than a 45-minute game should last, assuming both players take their time. Okay, so the question has been raised to him. What's he going to do? Really, he's got to cover e6. Okay, he's just covering it by sacrificing it. Okay, that's fine. How do I want to do this? Okay, so he's done the right thing. He's given up the pawn. But, all the other analysis that I looked at is now thrown out the window. It doesn't mean anything now. So I'm going to take the pawn with check. Question, which way, bishop or queen? I'm aiming for the bishop simply because I'm going to have to cover e4 in a moment, and it's not that my queen wouldn't come into it under attack. It's that bishop takes e6 check, king h8. I can play bishop d5 here. That covers e4, blocks the d file, and if he takes my bishop, I get this wonderful knight on d5 or a passed pawn with tempo. I can play e takes d5, attacking his knight, and his knight really doesn't have any good squares to go to, except for e5 is the only thing open. And then I just put my queen somewhere else, and he wallows in his misery. So I'll take with the bishop. It's much better. Bishop takes e6, and then I'm going to play bishop d5 unless he gives me his rook on f8. I don't think he's that greedy. Okay, just a quick look at the position. I have to deal with the pawn on e4 if I want to remain a pawn ahead. What are my other candidate moves? f3? Well, it's slow. I don't mind trading. I said earlier I don't mind trading my light squared bishop for a knight. I guess I still don't, although it's certainly become a powerful piece. what else is it going to do? It's kind of in my way a little bit, and there's no guarantee he will take my bishop and give me. He may not want to. He'll just see that his pieces just don't have squares to go to. So I don't really have a follow-up. Ideally, see the knight on e3. He'd like to be on f3 so that he can get to g5, and you can do some of those thematic smothered mates or something. And I'm too far removed from getting that possibility in. So the bishop was on g2, and it was kind of a dead piece for me. And now I've found a way to get my objective, to exchange it for a knight. Okay, I'll just play bishop d5. I mean, there's some things to be said about keeping it, but I have to deal with e4, and this will just do it nicely. And I still maintain pressure on the long diagonal, or well, it's not really a long diagonal. It's pretty long. It's not the long diagonal. It's a2 to g8. I have the pressure there until he takes it, because like I say, I may be taking back with the knight, and I may be taking back with the pawn. I don't know yet. And White's got a really tremendous position. It's black's down a pawn. Black has a weak isolated e5 pawn, and not a lot of hope here. Okay, so I spent 20 more minutes than he. I still have plenty of time, which I can use to share some of my thoughts. I guess a lot depends on what he does next. I don't have my queen rook and queen bishop developed yet. They're going to get there. I'm wanting to play knight f5 if he doesn't do some trading, but I'm pretty sure if he takes on d5, I'm going to take with the knight. I got to get that bishop into the game, and it's going to be there. So, like I say, I'm just awaiting developments. What will he do? But I'll probably take back with the knight. Again, having a pass pawn there is fine, but I'll get a pass pawn later somewhere else. It may become a pass pawn there on the e file if I surround and win his pawn on e5. So there's no rush to making it a pass pawn. Okay, he played knight a5. Now the drawback with that is that I can just move my queen, and where does his knight go next? And I can put it on b5, queen b5, and that attacks his knight. Where's his knight go? If he goes back to c6, I take it, right? Bishop takes c6, and then I collect another pawn. So he'd have to play b6 there, excuse me, and get his knight back into play. And so let's see. But his knight's still stuck there. Okay, it's still stuck there. If I just play queen c2, I'm securing e4. And if he plays knight takes d5, and I take back with my knight, he's got to deal with his bishop being loose, and then I have time to develop my bishop finally. And so I'll just play queen c2. It's safe. It's secure. He may eventually get his knight to c4 and back into the game by that means, but I'm not too worried about that, because I got to get my development completed and move on to the next phase of converting this pawn advantage. Okay, so what's he going to do? I've covered e2, e4, so if anything, I might even be, if he doesn't take on d5, I might seriously consider dropping the bishop back to a2 and keeping it, because certainly it's such a wonderful piece. I'm willing to trade it now just to improve the position of my knight so that my bishop can develop. But if he doesn't want to take it, then I'll keep it. I'll drop it back to a2 and play knight d5, just like I would have otherwise. And if we trade knights on d5, then I've got this killer bishop back on d5 blocking his d-file, and we'll go from there. And I'll still complete my development and figure out the next plan, how to undertake this. So really now, it's, if you get a position like this as white, and you're up a pawn, you want to try to find the most precise way to win, and that's what I'm going to endeavor to show you. There'll be nothing, as I consider, really spectacular about my moves. They'll just be logical moves, all designed with a purpose, that no matter how black continues, that he just won't have any ray of hope. And when I was an active tournament player, this is how I won a great number of my games. I would just pick up this small advantage, like here I've got the pawn and the slight advantage of the position, and I'd just squeeze my opponent to death. They would just end up without any counterplay whatsoever, and I would just carefully maneuver everything around, no rush, just take my time, focus on a plan, and a weak square, a weak pawn, whatever, go surround it, win it, improve the position a little bit better, always looking for a good endgame to go into, because again, I'm at move 20 and my development isn't complete, and I need that. I got to get my guys out so they can go help me with the next phase. He's not going to just fall apart here. Okay, so now he has played queen f8, so that takes some of the sting out of me playing knight f5. I can't do it now. The reason I can't do it now is because of the tactic. Knight takes d5, and oh yeah, I can do it. And then if I take my pawn, my queen's now guarding it. So, but I don't necessarily want to play. I don't necessarily want to play knight f5. Now let's think about a moment. What is he trying to do here? Well, maybe he's trying to play queen h3. Okay, maybe that's his goal, queen h3. So if I take that possibility away from him, what does he do? Okay, I could play king g2 here. Now if he plays knight g4, I just trade knights, which opens up the diagonal for my bishop, and then I play f3, attacking his queen, and he kind of has a target on f3, but it's well covered. And then I can get my bishop out and go from there, and I keep that powerful bishop on d5. It doesn't get traded for his knight. So I'm leaning towards king g2 just to take away the small hope that he has here. Now from there, okay, king g2, he could play knight takes d5, I play knight takes d5, now he tries queen g4, then I have f3, kicking his queen out. And this has got to be, will have to be frustrating for him. Okay, so king g2 is just a nice, quiet, subtle move just to end his fantasy of trying to mate me on h2. He's a ways away from it, but queen h3, knight takes d5, rook f6, rook h6. Yeah, king g2, just frustrate him. And again, I'm not getting my development completed, but I won a pawn, and this is the price I'm paying for winning the pawn. He's able to find a threat, so I just dealt with it. And he doesn't have any way to continue now. So this is, like I say, nothing spectacular about the moves, but each one comes with a purpose. Time is important, and to keep him out of h3 is critical because it just reduces an option that he has. I'm slowly squeezing him to death. It's like the snake that's surrounded his prey, and he's slowly crushing the life out of it. You know, king g2 just kept him from putting his queen on h3. Obviously, that was his intent. What else was he playing the queen c8? The other reason is maybe he wanted to bring the knight back to c6 and didn't want double pawns, but I don't buy that. Although that's an alternative benefit of playing queen c8. That's not his main idea. He wanted to play queen h3, and now he can't. So, like I say, you got to just squeeze the life out of these guys. Okay, now knight c4. What's he trying? Okay, well, I can handle that okay. I'm not too worried about it. Okay. I don't care if he plays knight b3 and takes my bishop on c8. That solves the problem of that bishop that I was trying to solve, been trying to solve all game. So what I could do is I could play knight f5 here. And the reason I want to play that, and there's a drawback to it which I'm seeing, and I'll explain it. Okay, the reason I want to play knight f5 here, it does more than just attack his bishop on e7. It opens up the line of my bishop, which I'm trying to get out. Now, what are his candidate moves? Well, he could play knight b3, and if I take his bishop on e7, he takes my rook on a1, and if I take his queen, he takes my queen, and I've actually lost the exchange here. Except his knight doesn't really have an easy way out. It's got to get back to a1, but I can probably deal with that. Let's see, knight, he's on d5 too. There's some tricks here. Okay, so even though I didn't see c4 coming, it's not a move I'm worried about because I'm strong everywhere else. So I've just got to find the most useful move. I'm being aggressive. There's nothing making me take his bishop on e7. If I play rook b1 and he takes my bishop on c1, I can just stop and take his bishop on e7 and let his knight figure out what it's going to do next. So what's he do there? Queen d7. If I now take his knight with rook takes c1, he has to play queen takes e7, and I can just then pick up the pawn on c4 with my bishop, and everything is fine and dandy. Now, as I said, there's some drawbacks in here I have to look at, but I can safely play knight f5 if he plays knight b3. But there's a minor drawback which I've got to remember, and I will as soon as I evaluate this initial position again. Okay, so knight f5. His trick is to do something with taking my bishop, because the fact that I can no longer take with the knight. Okay, so what he does is he plays knight takes bishop and on d5, and I play e takes d5. Now he can't take on d5 because e7 is hanging, and so what he does is he's got to deal with his bishop, right? Okay, and then that gives him moves like bishop c5 maybe, in which case I can just play bishop e. Well, wait a minute. d5 is hanging. I have to make sure d5 doesn't hang. That's my pawn that I won. So like I said, I knew there was something in here that was bothering me. I can play queen e4, and I'm covering... Oh, wait a minute. f5 is going to hang. Right? He's on it with his rook and his queen. What am I doing? Analyzing bad choices again. Well, I do that. Everybody does that. So what if I did it? You know, too many authors they're always trying to be 100% perfect, and it's like as if somebody says, "Oh, look, your analysis is flawed." Ha ha ha! It takes away your credibility. Baloney! It takes away no credibility. The master that's showing all these great things, he's got everything else. So what? He made one mistake. You don't need perfection. Okay, so back to this. I can't play knight f5 because f5 is going to hang. Okay, so all my great lines just don't work. So suppose I just do what I was intending to do and get my bishop developed. I don't get it developed where it wanted to go, but let's just get it developed. Bishop d2. Now if he plays knight b3, I play rook ad1. Now, if he wants to waste time going after my a pawn, that's fine. Guess what? He has hung c4. His knight is now no longer protecting c4. So bishop d2 gets the bishop developed finally. Knight b3 on my rook. Okay, I can even give up the exchange and still have a great game here. Rook ad1, and his pawn on c4 is hanging. What's he going to do? How's he going to defend it? Knight back to c5, I suppose. Well, no, it doesn't do it because what am I thinking of? Knight back to a5. Well, that's fine. You know, if anything, I can then just bring my bishop on d2 back to c1, get it out of my way, and I'm opposed on the d file. Okay. So with all due consideration and thought, it seems like bishop d2 is the correct move here, and I await developments. Again, I don't mind if he takes on d5 with his knight. I retake with my knight, and I've got this tremendous knight on the board, and then I've got new squares for my bishop to go to shortly. So let's see what he has. So, like I say, I've said it earlier, I've got to figure out a different strategy with that white squared bishop. Like to experiment and get him, with the dark square bishop, like to experiment and get him out a little quicker, because having him sit there to move 22 is just not my style. But so far the plan's been working. I just like to lead by example. I'm always preaching to get it out, and here I am not getting it out. Okay, so again, I don't mind if he plays knight takes d5. I don't mind if I take back with my knight. I don't mind if he plays knight b3. I play rook ad1, and I'm pressuring c4. He can't play queen h3, so what's he going to play? He's kind of stuck here for moves, and if he just spends a move, say with a6, oh, he did it. I would go back and just play like I would normally would. Okay, so now rook ad1. Okay, so he played knight b3, and I play rook ad1, and I don't mind if he takes my bishop on d2. I don't really care. I don't care if it's opposite colored bishops, because it's not going to stay opposite colored bishops. There's still knights on the board, and he's not going to get them off the board. He's got problems on c4, and I just got my development completed. Finally, move 23. And the whole idea of the chess opening for you is to get your pieces developed quickly, and then here I'm not doing it. And it's just because of the style I played to get the knight into c4 and then over to e3. As I originally explained it, white will often play h3 and then bishop e3. And so I'll look into that. But it certainly gives us some interesting positions. Okay, he took on d5, which I don't mind. Now, like I say, I take back with the knight. Now I'm tempoing his bishop, and he's got to deal with that. And I've got this wonderful knight now. He's saved his weak c4 pawn. I say now my objective is a new square for the bishop. So if he moves along, depends on where he moves it to. If he goes to c5, I might even play bishop g5 and keep him out of the d file. But now he's got a couple weak pawns. c4 is weak and e5 is weak. Now you could argue my a4 pawn is weak, but I don't even mind if he goes and finds a way to win it, because it's going to take him time to go attack it, then time to take it, and then time to get that piece back into play. So he doesn't really have a whole lot of time here. He's trying to play catch up, and it's not going to be that easy. So, like I say, for the moment, I'm attacking his bishops, which he has to deal with, and that gives me time to go on and do other things. So let's see, if he plays bishop c5, now he's pressuring f2 a little bit, but I've got it covered. I can play bishop g5, and now he's got to deal with his rook. I suppose he would play rook d7, and I can always bring my knight back to e3 now. Of course, I have to be careful I don't get my bishop trapped, but the idea of knight c4 is I'm trying to trade some rooks, and I'm trying to win his pawn on c4, but I might be dropping my bishop because he has h6. But I'm not too worried about all that. Let's if he plays bishop c5, I can also just simply play bishop e3, which helps secure f2 and further frustrates him. If he takes bishops, I take back with the knight, and now I'm threatening to start trading rooks. and I'm still pressuring c4. So he could play queen c6 here on my a4 pawn, and I can play a nice move like rook d5, and that's attacking e5. And if he takes as my rook, I take. How do I take, with the pawn or the knight? Let's try with the pawn this time. Getting a pass pawn. He plays queen takes a4, and as I explained, there he is spending some time taking a pawn, and now he's got to get it back into play. I have queen e4. They could go in for complications with queen a2. Like I say, I'm thinking on his time here, trying to find some logical moves, ways to continue this. So bishop c5, I have either bishop e3 is a decent move, or bishop g5. I haven't made up my mind yet. What else does he have while I'm waiting? Okay, so bishop c5. I kind of like to be able to play bishop g5 just to mess his rooks up a little bit. Rook d7. Now maybe bishop e3. What does that do? Does that change anything? You can double rooks on either file. I've lost a tempo deliberately trying to see if I can get anything out of it. But I'm not really threatening anything of his, though. It's the one thing about bishop c5. He doesn't have to take on e3. Nothing making him do that. He can just play queen c6 and allow me to exchange on c5 if I want, and just remain pressuring my pawn on a4. I may lose that pawn on a4, but if I do, good play by him. And my king g2 wasn't as clever as I thought, and but we'll see what he's doing here. He's got to deal with that the attack piece. And he can deal with it by allowing me to exchange it. He can guard it. He played bishop f6. Okay, I think that helps me. I think bishop c5 was a much better move for him, because really, what is his bishop doing here? It doesn't have a lot of scope. Now I can gain a tempo and attack his pawn on a7 with bishop e3. So sometimes you don't see yourself winning games, you see your opponent losing games. So bishop e3 gains me a tempo on the pawn and allows me to do other things. I'm guarding the pawn on f3, so if also another thing too, if I take his bishop, how is he going to retake? If I play well, no, he has a tempo getting out of it. So I was saying if knight takes bishop, if rook takes, I play bishop g5, but he gets out of that with rook takes d1, but that's okay. He still has a bad game, but bishop e3 just it invites him to make his position worse by giving up a pawn. Or does he play b6 or a6? You know, b6 puts it on a black square, the color of my bishop. a6 creates a hole on b6 for what it's worth, and then I can still take his bishop next move if I so desire. Okay, so bishop e3, and we'll see what he does. Again, I don't mind him playing knight c5 at all. I'll take his bishop, and then I'll take his knight, and then I'll do some more trading. If anything else, I'm a pawn ahead, and he still has a weak pawn on e5. So let's see how he handles this. He could try knight c5 here. Did I say that already? What's black going to do here? He played b6. Okay, that's fine. I don't mind b6 because it gives me that free move. Now let's evaluate a little bit here. If I play knight takes f6, he could throw his Zwischenzug at me. Rook takes f6. I'm sorry, not rook takes f6. Rook takes d1. Now I take on d1 with my rook, and he probably doesn't want to take back with the pawn, but he could. It just takes away an open file from him and gives him a less useful open file, but it does protect his isolated pawn on e5. But then his pawn structure is weaker. Now, the thing I would have to worry about is him trying to win my pawn on a4, so I'm not really poised to do anything on the d file yet, but I can be. If he takes with the pawn. If he doesn't take with the pawn, I can play rook d5, attacking his e5 pawn. Of course, I have him playing rook f6 and rook. He can't go to h6 when, as long as I have the bishop on the board. He's just not able to do anything on the f file. So my knight has almost kind of outlived its usefulness. There are some inherent problems with the black position, and it's now time. I can't really improve the position of my knight. It's not poised to take advantage of anything else in his position. It's time now for me to trade it. And if he trades a set of rooks, I think that helps me. I'll be getting the rook into e5 and doubling on the d file, and he's going to have to tread lightly. So really, the only other candidate move to play would be something like f3, but I don't need to play that. I'm not in any urgency to play that. It's the best he can do is somehow turn around and try and win my pawn on a4 with his queen, and that takes him out of play, and I can do a lot of things in the meantime. And to do that, I need the lines opened up. So I'll take his bishop, and we'll be trading some rooks here shortly. Okay, did take with the pawn. Okay, now I'm not too worried about that. I'm not too worried about him taking with the pawn because, as I said, this gives me some activity. So now what I can do is go for a double rook trade and go into a queen ending. The reason I want to do this is because I don't want to play rook d5 and even though it would get me a pass pawn with an exchange there, it would just allow maybe some nuisance value with those pawns on e4, e5, and f6. Maybe you can start advancing them. But if I trade the rooks, both sets, I'm going to end up with control of the d file. If I play rook takes d8, he plays rook takes d8, and I play rook d1. And if he takes, I'm on the d file, and he's got to be very careful with counterattacking on c6 because his back rank gets loose. I have checks on d8 and e7, and he's got to tread lightly. So rook d5, like I say, it's a candidate move, but it's not the best move. And if I take on d8 and he takes with the queen, and I put a rook on d1, and he could put his queen on e8, attacking my pawn. But then what I do is I can do all kinds of things. I can play bishop h6, attacking his rook and taking away a potential flight square for the king, and then set to doubling up on the open file, open d file, rook d5, and then queen d1, and all kinds of potential threats. Okay, so rook takes d8. I got mouse problems. Rook takes d8 is my move, and I'm going to follow up with rook d1, and he just doesn't have anything here. Rook d1. Okay, so what's the weak points in his position? Four of the six black pawns are on the color of my bishop. That's a plus. All I need to do is trade queens and rooks, and I have a winning bishop and knight, bishop versus knight endgame. So even though this player is rated 1656, a little bit lower, he's playing a good game. He's just made that miscalculation in the opening. Okay, so he's playing rook d7. He wants to double. So what I'm going to say is that I'm going to double, and I do that by playing rook d5. And if he plays queen d8, then I play queen d1. And voila, we have it. Because clearly he's saying that if I take his rook, he'll take back with the queen, and he's on the file, and I can't really get on it that easily. Although I can, and he would be attacking a4. So just rook d5 here, and I don't mind if he, in this line, if he takes on d5, because well, I guess got to make sure. But I'm saying some people might say that a player this rating I should have a incredible position against by now. I should be like up a piece or something, and maybe somebody will show me somebody else's game how they had a player this rating down a piece by this position or had him beat. Well, it's not my style. I have an interesting style of chess that just, like I say, squeezes people to death. I just don't give them a chance to get in the game, and that's one of the reasons why my blitz rating is low, is because I'll play players much lower than I in blitz, and I'm just got this very tiny advantage that I can't do much with, and then all it takes is one blunder, and I'm losing. So okay, so rook d5, queen. He could try queen c6, and then I double, and he takes. I take with the queen. He goes and gets his a4 pawn. I'm just verifying all this, and I have queen d8 check, king g7, queen h6 check, or e7 check. If king h6, or g6, I've got all kinds of possibilities here. H4 almost gets him in checkmate because the threat is h5. So h4, he tries h5, and yeah, I think he's close to lost. Suppose I just play queen f8. That threatens queen g8 mate. Okay, so rook d5. Rook d5 is the move here. Okay, now if he takes, I get a pass pawn now, and he really can't afford to give me a pass pawn now. And again, it opens up a diagonal for my queen, which e4 at least is coming, and depending on where his queen goes, I might get the queen into f5. So I have 17 minutes left, which is plenty of time. But like I say, I don't, unless they play really horribly and allow me some attack, I don't always win quick games. I've won my share, and I will again, just like everybody. You'll do the same. But for the most part, I just squeeze my opponents to death, and just leave them with no room to maneuver. And I'm only up a pawn against somebody rated 1656. Okay, good. He did what I wanted, and now I do what I want. I double my heavy pieces on the d file, and he can win my pawn. I don't care about the pawn, because then I'm going for his king. So, like I say, I keep the guys with me playing for a long time, and really they end up without a chance. The analysis will back me up. So now he's got to do something here. I'm threatening to take his rook. He pretty much has to make an exchange. He can't allow me to play rook d8 check. It's just gonna mess him up. Now I take with the queen, and before I do, let's just make sure. If if he takes, well, this just opens up a line for my king to come in, and yeah, I take with the queen here. Like I say, I want to checkmate him if I can. If he'll let me, I will checkmate him. And I worked out some possible mates. I'm not sure if they're forced yet, but I'll remember them if we get into that. Okay, so he went it. He probably agrees with me. Okay, so now, what are my advantages? I have a pawn ahead and a better king position. So now he moved too quick. He probably should have played f5 there. But let's just talk about. Do you see why he should play f5? Stop the video if you're not sure while I collect my thoughts here. Okay, you've now resumed the video. The reason he should have played f5 in that position was because I'm seriously contemplating g4 here. g4 just restrains his pawns. Okay, so it takes a tempo away from what I want to do. But if I play king f3, what if he just plays f5? And I'll evaluate that and make sure I'm correct. But I don't really need to move my bishop. Look at my bishop, how nice it is. It's keeping his knight from going anywhere. If he goes to c5, I just take it, and I reach a winning king and pawn ending. So the step now is to activate my king, but I've got to do it carefully. So let's just analyze. g4, okay, king f7, king f3. Now he can't really stray too far from the pawn because it'll just go and queen on him. So for instance, of king g6, I could seriously consider, well, I can't play d6 yet, but I just play like king e4, and again, his knight's so far out of play, it's pathetic. Knight a5. Now I play f4, and I'm threatening to win a pawn, so he has to take on f4, and then I take with the bishop, and I still have a pass pawn. He has a very poor king, and my king is active and in the center of the board. Now the alternative is, if I don't take or don't play g4, is I play king f3 and allow him to play f5. The purpose of that is just to gain time, and maybe I can create a weakness on those advanced pawns of his by using the bishop. Of course, we'll see. So, okay, if I play king f3, he needs to play f5. Okay. Now I could play g4 here, and that would mess him up. g4, he plays f4, and then my bishop's messed up. Wow. And my bishop gets trapped. Amazing. Okay, so I can't play g4 at that point, but I was looking at trying to attack his pawn from behind with a move like bishop g5, but he has king f7 and he's keeping me out of there. Okay, so g4 is my move. He needed to play f5 last move, but he didn't, so I'll play g4 now. Okay. So kudos to you if you found g4. You're thinking on the right lines. And now I can safely bring my king up, and my king will occupy e4. He cannot move his knight to c5. I take it and reach a winning ending. Okay, so what's he going to do? He's kind of stuck for moves. He doesn't have a whole lot he can do here. My ideal position is to play king e4 and king f5. Okay, so he's found that way to get his knight out by way of c2. Okay, well, king e4 just screams to be played, and then the idea is to play f4 and mess up his pawns. I could almost even offer the d pawn as a sacrifice, with the idea of sending his king away from defending his kingside pawns. But this should be an elementary win. You know, I have the bishop and his knight is a slow mover, and I have a pawn ahead. So king e4, what's it going to do? Knight c2. Well, fine. I go ahead and play f4. If he takes my bishop, king takes, and he should have a lost king and pawn ending here. Yeah, most definitely. So he can't take my bishop. And if he takes my pawn on f4, I can just take. I can take with the king and be winning. I can take with the bishop and the bishop's ready to go down to b8 and shortly and molest those pawns. And he's a long way from any counterplay. Yeah, just king e4 and he's in trouble. Just grinding him down here. King g6. I can even play d6 and king d5. Okay, so I was saying f4 in this position would be my move, but it doesn't have to be. I could play king f5, and that ties him up. Okay, king f5, what's he going to do? Then the other question is, what am I going to do? Okay, I think definitely if he takes on e3, he's left with a lost position, right? There's nothing he can do to save this. Nothing at all. I just, if anything, use my d-pawn to deflect him away from the defense of f6 and game over. The drawback with playing king f5 is that I can't play f4 as long as he keeps his knight on c2. So what's he do? He can't play h6. I take that pawn with my bishop. He can't play either a6 or h6. He can't play either one. It hangs a pawn directly to my bishop, and he can't play b5 because that hangs a pawn. So king f5, what are his choices? King e7. Okay, so suppose I just slow play it. I'm in no hurry here, right? He can't do anything. I'll play h4. What's he going to do? March his king back and forth. Okay, now I play d6. And now his king, where's his king go? He can't go anywhere. King f5 just wins this decisively. That gives him a knight f3 or knight e1 option with the idea of trying to get into play by way of g2 or f3, but I don't see how he has enough. I don't see. What does he do? Okay, king f5, knight f3. What's his threat? To play knight h4 check, driving me out? I guess. Okay, so maybe that's all he has. So king f5, knight e1. Well, that's kind of slow for him, knight e1. Suppose I just play d6 right there. If he plays knight f3 there, well, on knight e1 too, I don't even have to play knight f1. I can just play g5 in that position too. And on knight f3, I just take on f6, so he has to take on g5. And I have my choice. Which pawn do I want? And I can probably get both of them. Bishop takes g5, and e5 is still hanging. Yeah, king f5 just flat out wins. You know, dominating king, bishop versus knight, pass pawn, black pawns all on bad squares. Everything white could hope for. And this is the kind of position, you know, the grandmaster beats the international master with in a long tournament game, except they didn't quite have it. They had it a little tougher than this. They had to go and win that pawn later. Okay, so Now, as I said, knight e1, I just play g3 or g5, and his pawns fall like a house of cards. g5. Okay, so I'm threatening to take one pawn on f6, so he has to take, and then he doesn't really have a useful defender for e5. He can go attack my pawn on h2, but I can deal with that. I'll just take with the bishop here and keep the king on the pawn. Okay, so what's he do now? Knight b2, trying to get or knight d3, trying to win a pawn on b2. Well, I can deal with that. Okay, so now he's on my bishop. That's not a loss. What if I just play h4 here? Now the intent is to play king e4, attacking the knight, and then winning the pawn on e5. That just seems to make common sense. There's no rush. We're not going anywhere. Doesn't that seem to be the best way? Just knight or h4. What does he do? Okay. He's too slow to try to go and win the pawn on b2 and a4 and then run his a pawn. He's just too far removed. So if h4, I secure my bishop, and the threat is king e4, and when the knight moves, I take on e5. Even if he takes my bishop off, my pawns are keeping his king away from defending e5. So just h4 does it. Preserves the pawn and just leaves him without any useful move here. Okay, I say now my threat is king e4, and my d pawn is too close to queening. Even if he tries to allow, okay, after knight e4 or king e4, knight takes g5, hg5, his king is too slow to go to g6, take the g pawn, and start running the h pawn because my pawn queens, and he's far away from queening. Okay, so he played h5, and well, he can get a pass pawn of his own if I allow it. King e4, knight takes g5, hg5. If he plays, gotta be careful. Okay, let's see. King e4, knight takes g5, h takes g5. I'm still in the box, so to speak. If he plays h4, well, wait a minute. If it was my move and I play king takes e5, I can still catch his pass pawn, right? So the point is that after he takes on g5, king e4, knight takes g5, hg5. The point is that I'm threatening to take king e5, so he would have to play h4 right away, and that gets me in the box. King f3, king g6. Now I just play d6, and he can't stop both pawns. I don't even bother playing king g4 and allowing h3. And the second he runs his h pawn, I just go park my king over there. Okay, so king e4 wraps up the game. He doesn't have a move. He can take on g5, but he'll see that the resulting king and pawn ending is lost. Okay, so he did take it. And now I can't take on e5 right now, but like I say, my king is inside the box. Now I could get cute with either d6 or g6 check here, but there's no reason for it. Like I say, I'll just back up with king f3, and I'm threatening king g6 and king takes h4. and now he's deflected his king away, so now I just play d6 as explained, and he can't stop both pawns. Well, he has that, but that doesn't really do any good. I can take it, and I'm still in the box. I can play king g5 or king g4. I kind of like that. Just play king g4, and he doesn't have enough. Although I could take it. There's just king g4 is problematic. If he plays king f7, king takes h4, king takes a king e6, king g4, king takes d6. I keep my g pawn though. King g4, king f7, king takes h4, king e6, king g4, king takes d6, king f4, and followed by g6. Yeah, just king g4 is fine. Just end the debate. King g4. No rush. There's alternative ways to win. They all look about the same. Only a pawn ahead against somebody 2 or 3 classes under me. Kind of sad, isn't it, that I have to struggle so hard to beat these guys. What's wrong with me? No, it's not. It's just my style. And I'll do this to players rated 2200 too. I just give them no chance. So, and this kind of backs up my belief. We're all capable of playing 2200 strength in a given game. Okay, thanks, Mr. James. And what else can we say about this? It was an interesting struggle. The video is now an hour and a half long. I'm going to cut it short here in a moment. I want to thank everybody for their time in looking at this. I hope that I gave something useful that will benefit all your play. That's the purpose of this. And it keeps me entertained. I enjoy making them. And we look forward to talking to you all soon. Take care.